So one of the many debates out there with lawn care enthusiasts is whether you are going to apply a pre-emergent or maybe you are going to forego a pre-emergent application. Really all depends on personal preference. Another thing that comes down to personal preference is whether you're going to apply a water dispersible like this prodiamine that I have, or you can even go granular. Either way, totally up to you. But the question remains, should you apply a pre-emergent or should you hold off? I've got a couple prime examples here in my lawn to argue for and against both of those options, so let's talk about those now. So recently I had an opportunity to be featured on a live stream with the Grass Factor. It's Matt Martin, and I was also accompanied by Ryan DeMay, who is a sports turf manager and consultant, and then also Ray Ito, who may be better known as the Green Doc. And one of the things that we talked about on the show, one of the many things that we talked about, was pre-emergent applications. And when I applied my pre-emergent, I went ahead and I did my first round. I always apply that in 2 separate rounds. I do the low rate application 2 times, and I do those about 6 weeks apart. So I went ahead and applied my first round of prodiamine, and I applied that with Subvert Prefix, which is a new product out by Subvert Nutritionals. It's supposed to inhibit some of the root pruning effects that you get from applying pre-emergents. Now, while pre-emergents are great at stopping crabgrass emerging out of the ground, there is some collateral damage that comes along with that application, and one of those is that it does have an effect on the roots of the turf grass. I also went ahead and applied a little bit of nitrogen just to kind of wake things up, and I always like to add a little bit of urea into those applications if I can, just to sneak a little bit of nitrogen into every application. So I went ahead and applied some UMax at about 1/10 of a pound per 1,000 square feet, just to kind of get the lawn to wake up a little bit faster when I made my pre-emergent application. So let's go ahead and take a walk around the lawn. I want to show you guys a couple of different use cases and some examples of, arguing for and against those pre-emergent applications. So starting out here in the front yard where I have the Kentucky Bluegrass section, it actually looks really good for the middle of March. And this is a section where I really don't need to do any overseeding, even though I do have a couple washout spots from when I did the renovation that required a little bit more attention. I went ahead and plugged those areas with the Pro Plugger so I can get a little bit of that rhizomatic spread out of the Kentucky Bluegrass. The issue that comes from putting the pre-emergent down on the bluegrass is that it actually inhibits some of the rhizomes from spreading, and I'm not going to get as aggressive of a spreading action as I would if I would have left out the pre-emergent. But because I already did my first application of my split app, as Ryan said in the video, the hay is already out of the barn at this point, so I'm probably going to go ahead and apply my second application, my second split app of the low rate of prodiamine, and just hope that the spots fill in on their own. And one thing I did do to sort of help that process is I got the Pro Plugger out and I plugged some of those areas where I had some thick bluegrass, and I plugged it into those bare spots that needed just a little bit of help. That's generally the quickest and easiest way for a self-repairing or a stoloniferous or rhizome type grass that's going to self-repair, is to just go ahead and throw some plugs in there. And just for argument's sake, let's also put out another scenario out there where maybe you might not be a fan of pre-emergents, or maybe you missed your pre-emergent window, or you moved into a house after it was already too late to put pre-emergents down. It's not the end of the world. There are other options that you can do. A lot of people like to go in with Tenacity and tank mix that with a 3-way herbicide. So that would be Tenacity, Quincorilac 2,4-D, maybe a little bit of Triclopyr, and do a blanket application of the lawn. That'll actually help clean up a lot of the weeds that maybe already be in the lawn post-emergently, and then the Tenacity is going to give you about a 30-day residual on any pre or post-emergence of crabgrass or other weeds that you've got going on in the lawn. On the other side of that, if you've just done a renovation and you're really focused on getting the turf healthy and getting it thick and growing in, pushing a lot of fertility, getting the lawn nice and thick is another way that you can prevent weeds. The thicker stand of turf that you have is going to be a decrease for overall weed pressure in the lawn. So it may not be a situation where you're going to be putting down pre-emergent all the time, because you're not going to have a lot of weed pressure, and maybe just post-emergently managing some weeds on a spot spray or maybe doing a blanket spray might be a better option for you. Now the backyard with the fescue is a completely different story. This poor backyard just cannot catch a break. For the third year in a row, big projects going on back here as we've sort of developed this house into what we want it to be. We had the deck built 2 years ago. We also had a concrete patio poured in the backyard here. So we had big equipment and excavators here in the backyard, and they definitely tore up the lawn back here quite a bit. We also have a lot of shade in this area, although we have had some of these trees thinned out recently. And then this big diseased oak tree behind me, this one is going to be coming down completely. So this backyard just, with the amount of foot traffic back here with the dogs and the kids, they play. I'm constantly putting seed down in the backyard to try and keep it thick, trying to manage it and make it look respectable, all while it's pretty much a functional place that we use a lot. So it's really hard when you have a lot of activity, a lot of foot traffic, dogs, shade, construction. It's just a turf's worst nightmare. So this would be one of those cases where pre-emergent is definitely not going to be a viable option because I'm constantly adding seed to these areas. And so post-emergent applications are really going to be the best way to manage a portion of my yard like this backyard. So what it comes down to in instances like this is your cultural practices, your mowing, your watering, your fertility are all going to come into play into making this a nice stand of turf, even though you don't really have a means of preventing any weed pressure. It's all going to become post-emergent. And while it's green back here, don't get me wrong, it's green, it looks okay right now. Granted, we are still really early in the season. This could definitely be better. And as it warms up and our growth degree days start to increase, we get to that 100% growth phase kind of around the May timeline, the backyard will look a whole lot better. But usually going into the winter and coming out of winter, it just doesn't look that great just because of how patchy it is back here due to all the excessive activity. So now that I've muddied the waters a whole lot, what do you guys think? I've talked about the advantages of pre-emergent. I've talked about the advantages of not applying a pre-emergent. It's kind of a case-by-case scenario to where if you apply a pre-emergent, is that going to be the best option for you in the situation that you're in, or is it better to forego those pre-emergent applications? For me, it's kind of a 50-50 split. I could really flip a coin in the front as to whether I'm going to use a pre-emergent or not. And as I mentioned before, I probably am going to go ahead and use my pre-emergent. I have all the tools and the resources here to fight against the root pruning and the rhizomatic activity of the Kentucky bluegrass. And then in the backyard, definitely not an option for me. I'm going to continue to seed this and give it some fertilizer, water it, and try and fight against the foot traffic as much as I can. So with that, leave some comments in the comment section below on what you guys think. If you have a preference, I know some people are definitely pro pre-emergent, some people are anti pre-emergent. Tell me what you've been using, or maybe you've got a plan that you use that works better. Maybe you have a post-emergent cocktail you like to make. Let's hear about it. I want to see those in the comment section. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and we'll catch you in the next one.